Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project Live. Today's topic is going to be on another superpower of leadership, and that is the topic of humility and vulnerability. This is a topic that's quite often misunderstood, so stick around for some very practical tips on how you can embrace humility and vulnerability to take your leadership to the next level. The way to think about it is this: humility as a leader is not pretending that you have all the answers. And a huge common mistake that many first-time leaders make in particular is thinking that they need to have all the answers. And that's not true at all. You're there to create the environment where your team can do their very best work. You employ people for their intellect, for their skills, for their experience. So you don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to create the environment where people can do their very best work and can co-create together. So the first step in humility is that we need to stop pretending that we have all the answers. The second part is admitting when we make a mistake. And this can be tough for some people. It really can. So I get that, but we need to be able to stick up a hand and to be able to admit when we have made a mistake. And you're going to see in today's video as to why that is so important. The next part around humility is not to think that you're better than everyone else. This is where you really start getting a bit grandiose, believing that you're better than the people around you. And if other people feel that, it's very off-putting. If you're portraying yourself as someone that thinks they're better than everyone else, you're going to get people offside very quickly. And the role of a leader is to inspire people into meaningful action around your worthy cause. And people are not going to follow you if they believe that you think that you're better than everyone else. So park your ego at the door and become more humble. Now, what about vulnerability? The other key topic that we're talking about here. Well, it's the willingness to show emotion. If you're having a bad day, in the right way, share that you're having a bad day. If you're very happy, share that you're very happy. If you've got weaknesses, and we all have weaknesses, there's no such thing as a perfect leader. It's about allowing others to see that weakness, which is in fact a way to build trust, because you're then showing the other person, by showing your vulnerable side, by showing your weaknesses to them, you're showing that you trust them. You're showing that you trust them because you're sharing what could be considered a secret with them, that you're trusting that they won't use that against you. The first thing you might be thinking is that when a leader shows humility or when they show vulnerability, isn't that a sign of weakness? Isn't it weak leadership? And John C. Maxwell sums this up beautifully. He talks about a time that he was on stage and he had this very question from a senior executive, a captain of industry, where he was trying to encourage people to admit their mistakes and admit their shortcomings. And this very experienced executive in the room, a CEO of a multinational company, challenged John and said, "But that's just showing weakness, and I don't want to be a weak leader." And John's answer just summed it up beautifully. And he said that's because you think they don't already know. So by admitting your mistakes, admitting your weaknesses, it's a show of authenticity. People are very astute judges of character. They generally know what you're good at. That's probably why they're following you. But they also know that you're human. They know that you have weaknesses. They know that you have foibles. So by opening them up and admitting to them and having the self-awareness to own your weaknesses, it builds trust because they now see you as an authentic human being. And they know that when you speak, they can trust what you're saying because you're going as far as openly sharing when you make a mistake. The other key is to think about, well, what else happens when we're not humble? We've heard some of the dangers of not being humble and not being vulnerable. What are the benefits? Well, first of all, you become more relatable. People want to connect with people that they know, like, and trust. How do they get to know you? Yes, you do need to be out there. So we're not saying don't be outwardly vocal about who you are, what you do, and why you do it. They also want to like you. And being humble is a very likable trait. And they want to trust you. And to trust you means that they believe in the things that you're telling them. And when we are humble, when we are vulnerable, and we're willing to admit the negative side of life, they're more likely to believe us when we talk about the positive side of life. So it builds trust. It makes us approachable because we are a human being. So if we want someone to come up to us and share something about them with us, the best way to do that is to share something about us with them. So we start the process. We start the process with humility and vulnerability, and then others will approach us. And they'll approach us with good news, with bad news, with indifferent news, because they trust us and they'll build this strong connection with us. It also creates space for people to learn and grow. So you may be the expert in a topic. No problem with that. But if you're the expert every single time, other people don't get the opportunity to learn and grow. So by taking a humble step backward, even in a topic where you are quite knowledgeable, it creates space for others to step up and start learning and growing. It also becomes a source of empowerment because now the people feel like they're part of the solution. Instead of being told the solution by the smartest person in the room, they now feel like they're part of the solution. And when they feel empowered and engaged, they're going to take more accountability and more responsibility. Now, you might be asking, well, what if this is so good, what holds people back? Why aren't people doing it already? And of course, some people are, but not everyone gets this right. I admit I didn't always get this right in my career, that's for sure. What holds us back is pride. It can be hard to admit when you've made a mistake. Your own personal pride gets in the way. It might even be your ego, and ego is an often misunderstood word, but it means sense of self. So if my sense of self is of a very smart, intellectual person, and now I admit that I was wrong, is it challenging my own sense of self? Is it a challenge to my ego? And when it comes to externalization or externalization of this, we start asking, well, what will people think of me? If I admit that I was wrong and I got it wrong, what are people going to think of me? And we usually come to a conclusion that people might think less of us. But the funny thing is the exact opposite is true. When we're able to admit that we made a mistake, that we got it wrong, people admire us more. So we have this feeling holding us back that we're worried that people will think less of us. And yet, if we stick up our hand and admit that we made a mistake, people actually think more of us. So if someone comes to you with a challenging problem and you legitimately don't know the answer to the question, start with, I don't know. I don't know. And let's work on it together. Could be, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Or I don't know, let's work through it together. That's a great way to start with your humility. The next part is to get curious. So here's your call to action for today's show. Check in with yourself. Are you humble? Do you show humility? Do you show vulnerability? If not, why not? What's holding you back? Is it some of these limiting beliefs that we spoke about earlier where you're concerned that people will think less of you by admitting your mistakes? Well, I want you to reframe that. Reframe and know that when we admit our mistakes and we admit our shortcomings, people think more of us, not less of us. They think more of us, not less of us. Remember the benefits. Then when we show humility and vulnerability, it creates the space where others can as well. Gives them the license to be themselves, to be their authentic self. It gives them the space where they're happy to share when they make a mistake, which is something you definitely want to know. And it gives them the space to learn and grow. Start role modeling the behaviors that you want to see in others. If you're honest with yourself, you'll say that you admire humility in other human beings. Well, start role modeling that behavior yourself. And 3 powerful words that can get you started is just the words, I don't know. Stop pretending that you've got all the answers. Get curious and start asking better questions instead of always giving answers.